What's going on, everyone? It's Mitch from RespectMyRegion.com, back with another episode of the North American Weed Tour podcast. We're looking at the best in legal cannabis across the map today, joined by very special guests. I got Rama of Green Street. How you doing today, Rama?
I'm amazing, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. For those of us that follow on LinkedIn, we just dropped a little short interview of us chatting at Hollow Flowers here a couple weeks ago. We're going to dive in a little bit more.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I start off every episode with our guest origin story with cannabis. So whether that's personal, professional, or a touch of both, man, just curious kind of when you and cannabis started your relationship.
I mean, technically, I'd say, my mom is growing plants right now in Massachusetts. She just sent me photos of her first harvest she cut down. So she's been, in the cannabis game for a long time. And, my name's Rama. She was a super hippie. So it was definitely around growing up. I actually gave what I called peach tree seeds to my friends growing up when I was like, this is like when we were like 10 years old or something, and those peach tree seeds actually were weed pot seeds that were like at the house that were just kind of sprinkled around like in these weird little, boxes or little cabinets and stuff. And that's the first like memory I have of it, and then I didn't personally start smoking until I was 25. And that came about. I was doing like a punk rock record label for years, and at that point, I guess I would have already been doing it for like 7 or 8 years. And I had a friend, I have a dear friend still named Liz Tempesta, and Liz was like trying to peer pressure me to smoke weed for a long time, And when I finally did it when I was 25. I was just like, holy shit, this is amazing. Why did I wait so long? And these kind of things. And I've been a daily smoker since then. So it's 20 years now. And then like on the professional level, basically 10 years ago, I met my partner now in Green Street. His name's Josh Shelton. He's an attorney. And we were doing G-Pen, the portable vaporizer, through my ad agency. So we were doing Beats by Dre, Disney, DreamWorks, Universal, Interscope, Pepsi, like big things. And we signed G-Pen, and we just did like social media strategy and a style guide and packaging design, like the stuff you'd kind of traditionally do as an ad agency for a brand. And that went so crazy and was so successful that Josh came back to me, who was G-Pen's attorney, and he said, that his law firm and my ad agency should merge together to create a compliant ad agency. This is 10 years ago, so we were really early on. But the same feeling I got from the men and women that were in the music industry and doing in the bands there that were started as like little teeny bands and grew to huge, like headlining festival bands is the same feeling I got from the men and women in cannabis. So we really, after a few months of like really deeply considering how we'd approach being an agency, we kind of had the hunch that if we could survive off making like $2 an hour for the first couple years, then we'd be positioned to where like trust is priceless. And that's what we did. We did 5 years of like logos, packaging, style guides, investment decks, all that kind of stuff for the industry. And I thought that's all we do, had an ad agency for weed, but we ended up partnering with Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, 5 years ago. And he started allowing us to start building IP in the cannabis space. So since then, we've launched the Hall of Flowers show, which I spoke to you about last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. And we have a building in downtown LA that we opened for cannabis. We have a consumer festival for cannabis that we just launched. And we have some brands and some other stuff that we're kind of working on. But essentially, like advertising for 5 years turned into like an IP creation house for the last 5.
Man, that's fire. And I remember like G-Pen was the first like, I don't want to inaccurately speak or have people come for me, but like the first cannabis brand, right? Like back when this shit was medical, at least like in Seattle, like early 2010s, when people were shopping at dispensaries, but everything was like collectives or compassionate care. cares, everything was kind of centered around caregiving and a
Mhm.
very medical vibe. It was a medical market. There
Yeah.
wasn't too many brands that were sticking around, or obviously at that point, MSO, that term didn't even exist, for this
Mhm.
space. But G Pen was like, and obviously they're a device or ancillary, but they were a brand that obviously was everywhere and was like sponsoring events and putting out collaborations with
Yeah.
music artists. And that was, I remember outside of my first dab on a probably nasty,
Mhm.
titanium nail that was far too hot. I remember the G Pen. I can't remember what the name of the device was, but carrying around the oil on that. And that was
Yeah.
early. Me and Joey talk about all the time when RMR was just selling t-shirts, the G Pen was fueling us through,
Mhm.
being at obviously we sold t-shirts at Hempfest and stuff like that in Seattle where you could just openly smoke and it was all good. But we also did a lot of like more welcome to everyone, a lot of families, and the G Pen was holding it down for cannabis
Yeah.
consumption.
Yeah, hell yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, all the collaborations you're talking about, that's what we focused on, and the true branding is what we focused on. All the events we did, that's what I did for them, and but we treated them. We were doing Beats by Dre at the time, and we just treated G Pen the same way we treated Beats by Dre, like with respect and like forward thinking and how to work with artists and licensing and collaborations and word of mouth and all those kind of things. And I was like a heavy user. I was using my G Pen every day at the office the same way that you guys were. So it was really easy for us to kind of wrap our brain around like where we think it could go and how to like respect it, and build it at the same time. But yeah, they were, and to their point, to give them credit, that success was really meteoric, I guess they say, right? Like, and it was because Chris, the owner, was able to react in such a quick time on opportunities that's why they won. It was really like I would call him and be like, "Hey, I have an opportunity to do this. We need to know in an hour," and he would be like, "Approved" or "denied" or something like this, And he didn't have to like. He would kind of even say like, "I don't have to run it by my CFO or any of these things. If I want to do it, we can do it." And that's why they were able to have such success is they could really like move quick and take advantage of all the opportunities out there. And nowadays, obviously things have changed for everybody, but that was really a big opportunity for them because with cannabis back then, 10 years ago, we weren't getting offered the first opportunity at stuff. Like people would come to us with an event after they've exhausted talking to all their corporate brands. And then they'd be like, well, shit, the event's on Friday. Like maybe these weed guys have money, so we'd get a lot of last minute opportunities to come in. And, that was like something that that we've been trying to fix forever is this like kids table mentality that the cannabis people are sad at, that we're sad at, but the G Pen for sure, like half the restaurants in LA told me that they wouldn't be open without the G Pen because the chefs could hit them and blow them into the vents, opposed to going outside and smoking a joint. And, we were smoking it, like crazy. And, even a funny story about G Pen actually real quick is that when I met Chris, we were outside of Keith Huffnagel's booth, Huff, the clothing brand in Vegas. And they had been working on a project, the Huff like G Pen like Flask collabo thing already. And Chris looked super familiar, and I'm standing outside the booth. Chris is outside the booth. We're looking in the booth for Huff for Keith, and we start talking to each other. And he's like, "You look really familiar," and I'm like, "No, you look familiar." And we couldn't figure it out. And we exchanged. He's like, "Oh, you want to smoke weed?" And I thought he'd have a joint. He pulled out the G Pen out of his pocket, like, "Boop, this is weed." And I was like, "Holy fuck!" And I hit it right in the thing. Oh my god, the best thing of all time. Weed you can smoke inside the trade show, and then we exchanged numbers, and he called me like 30 minutes later. And he goes, "Dude, I know where I know you from." And I was like, "What's that?" He's like, 339 South Detroit. And I was like, "That's my address." And I was like, okay, like weird. And he goes, "Dude, we're neighbors." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I live in your apartment building." And then we ended up sharing a wall, literally. Like we were one door down from each other for years. But he was doing his business. I was doing mine. I wasn't in cannabis. He maybe was or something. And we never talked. We made eye contact a couple times, but we never even exchanged words. And, and then literally like we ended up being neighbors, and then that led to us hanging out all the time. And then they finally were like, fuck it, we want to go for it. We want the Beats by Dre, like, respect and like attention and, work that goes into building brands like that. So, yeah.
That is hilarious that you were neighbors.
Awesome.
And it took that finding out, but you said the G Pen changed the game. But something else you unpacked earlier a second, where you say, you realize if you could work for $2 an hour for a couple years, you could build that trust, and that trust being priceless. And obviously, coming from the music space, right, that is a labor of love. Nobody gets into me. I mean, few people maybe get into music with getting rich, but people that have been in music realize that quickly is not a get rich quick scheme. There's a lot of
if you get in, it's kind of like cannabis. If you get in it to get rich, you're probably not going to be successful. Both of these things.
Yeah. And it's a long tail, grooming an artist from unknown to, selling out or whatever, even if it's not even selling out stadium, just selling out shows, right? It's a long tail, a lot of time and money invested before you start seeing things coming back. And I always say, like, selling music or any form of art is going to be one of the hardest things that you're ever going to sell, because like supply and demand, like simple economics doesn't necessarily really apply to that in the same sense of services or goods. What all about music besides that kind of conditioned you for this cannabis industry and all of the challenges, obstacles, and hard growth that have came along with that?
Yeah, I mean, so I literally look at it like music, because that's what I know mostly. And when I started the company, I was making like comparisons. I was like, okay, your MSO point a few minutes ago, there was no MSOs. So to me, the MSOs are the major labels. But back then, there was no major labels, right? In cannabis, it was all indie labels. And some of these are going to become the Geffens and the Interscopes and whatever, right? So it was all indie labels. That's how I looked at it. And then there was no South by Southwest or CMJ or Rolling Stone or Bonnaroo or any of these like kind of things, that these platforms that kind of brands can launch from, that didn't exist in cannabis either. There was High Times Cannabis Cup, and that was really it. That was back then, So to us, we were like, we got to build platforms and brands the same way that music has it, and we need to have some consumer festivals, and we need to have some B2B festivals, and we need to have media out there, And but that was the comparison. Right now, I literally make jokes that I'm basically running like a weed record label. In fact, my friend, good mentor, friend of mine, Zach Nadilli, he really helped me a lot with the Green Street branding and like the foundational work that it takes to do brands. And he calls me the A&R of weed. That's what he thinks I'm good at. Like I'm like the ultimate A&R for weed, like bundling, packaging, ideas together, this kind of stuff, And then the final example I'll say is 20 years ago, and I'm sure you can find this article online or something, but 20 years ago, there was an article in the Boston Globe, which was the big newspaper. And it was like we were on the cover of the entertainment section or something. And it was my facility in Boston that I called Inatech. It was based off the Office Space movie. And it was a building that I rented that I subleased out space to tons of other music people in Boston. So I had multiple record labels in there, record labels that are still around today, 20 years later. I had big booking agents in there, people like Matt Galley, who's like #1 booking agent in the world right now. He was sharing space with me. Jen Malone, who does all the music for Euphoria and John Wick and, things like this, was in there. So right now, currently, I have the weed building, right? I have Green Street, which is the weed epicenter. But 20 years ago, I had this exact same concept, but for music. So now people are like, how did you build Green Street? It's because I built Big Wheel or Inatech or Tarantulas or Doghouse, or all the record stuff, music stuff I did. I built that kind of the same way, but it goes back to weed, right? You buy a bag of weed and you sell some to your friends, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what it's been forever. I got this office space, which subleasing it out to my music friends, strength in numbers, sharing resources, whatever it is, and now we're just doing it for cannabis now, 20 years later.
Yeah, whole new game, but it's interesting, right? Like with legalization, these opportunities that just previously didn't exist, right? Back then, you couldn't have thought of hey, what if we had the same model for weed? It just that
Yeah,
wouldn't, it wouldn't have even been like, oh, that's a pipe dream someday, right? It
for
just like
sure.
that thought
Yeah.
didn't even exist.
Even with Hall of Flowers, right? Like Hall of Flowers was an idea that I had for literally years before we launched it. And it probably wouldn't have been successful if we launched it when I wanted to, because it was right before it was like the packaging guidelines weren't even there and all that, like the legalities weren't really there yet. So Hall of Flowers was launched at the perfect timing, but it was for me years in the making, before that. But for sure, timing is everything on a lot of projects like this,
And so one of the things that's just always inspired me, I mentioned in the post the other day, like I really think that you're like a visionary type person, right? Like in talking to you and just hearing about what you've done in the past and now, it's clear to me that like that's one of your strengths is like having big vision, but not untethered to the earth, right? Like, but it is it's vision. So what is it about? Obviously, you've launched a lot of things at this point, been behind a lot of things. What is it about like having these dreams, these goals, or seeing, having visions and then bringing them to life? Like, what is that process like for you, even if it is, something that you feel like might be early or a little bit bigger than yourself? Obviously, like Green Street, what you're at now was much bigger, I'm sure, than when you originally had an
Oh,
idea for that.
for sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would say like, what's the? I really love this question actually. It takes obsession. Honestly, like the real answer is I'm obsessed, and not in a good way. I'm like in like a dark circles under the eyes. Can't have a girlfriend. Like way, you know what I mean? I'm like that, like obsessed, right? And it's not even healthy, to be honest. You know what I mean? I'm overweight, like all this kind of things, right? And it's like, but it takes that obsession to almost run any business, and I'm sure people can be healthy and run businesses, of course, and they can have relationships and run businesses, absolutely. I've just been doing it this way for so long, like back to the punk rock music thing. When you're in a band and you're managing an artist, it's not a 9 to 5 business. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You know what I mean? Like I would tour with the artist and at 2 a.m. have to respond to emails and make phone calls, and you know what I mean? So it's like this thing that my whole life has been like, nights and weekends don't exist, And then when I did the deal with Gary, he works nights and weekends like crazy. He'd call me at like midnight in New York, and I'll be like Netflix on the couch, whatever, and I'll see him calling and be like, "Oh my God, what the fuck?" And I'm like, "Oh, what's up, Gary? I'm just crushing emails. What are you doing?" You know what I mean? And because he's just such a workaholic, but again, he has more balance in his life or whatever. He has more success, so he can kind of like hire some extra people to help him or whatever it may be or something. But it really takes like the obsession, and then I think the process for everybody's different. Like you have to be motivated. You have to want to spring out of bed every day. It's really hard to run your own business. I had a friend that I had a business with. We started a business with years ago, and maybe 15 years ago, and he was from the corporate world and was like creative director, making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, doing an incredible job. And we decided to start a business together, DIY from the ground up, and it almost killed him, like because he was just so not used to like having to be available every second of your life, and he couldn't really turn it off. Where I'm like getting better at it's been 30 years of running my own business and not having a job, so it's what I know now, but it's just a commitment. You have to sacrifice everything. It sounds so cheesy, but like all those kind of sayings are true. Like if you show me the luckiest person, I'll show you the hardest working, or whatever it may be. So
Yeah, all that cliche shit they write in Hallmark cards, man. The reason it's in there is because there's no better way to describe it.
My version of that is nothing replaces hard work. And that's just what I've really come to. Again, I'm from Boston, so there's a crazy work ethic on the East Coast. And when I came here to Los Angeles, I just figured if I could just put more work in than everybody else, I'll be luckier than everybody else, or something like that. I know that it's not a perfect science, but that's just the reality. You got to be kind of obsessed with it. And then for me personally, like what makes me be able to do it is my only kind of fear, I guess, with the business is running out of what I call gas money. like meaning like, like right now I'm like the race car, like winning the race or whatever, like really crushing it. And the only thing that could fuck me up is like not be able to have enough fuel to keep going, so that's like my whole thing. And for me, my brain, it's hardest to switch from running the business to the creative side. So I normally bring people in to run the business side. All my businesses that I have, Hall of Flowers, brought in the number one experts in the world, Danny and Aaron, to run it. Danny's done more work than I could ever imagine, has built it bigger than I could ever imagine. I have a partner, Josh Shelton, who's the attorney with Green Street, and he helps me with all like the back end business stuff there. And, Gary helps me with the other business stuff. And then I have, festival partners that I'm about to announce soon. They're doing the back end for me there. So it's kind of like setting myself up to be like excited about it, because I wouldn't be obsessed with doing like decks and spreadsheets all day. That's bad. Mm-hmm. I'm obsessed with like these things. Like this is work right now. Mm-hmm. How amazing is that?
Yeah. What's turned into just talking about the passions has definitely become work in a lot of senses. And on that, obviously, you're clearly well connected in this space, but also something about yourself is like you're real low key, whether it's your personal social media presence or just in person. You're not like look at me, I'm in front of the camera. You're not a salesy dude that I feel like is really chasing people down consistently. You don't strike me as a person that's always asking. So I'm curious, like, what are some of those ways that being such a low-key individual, you've been able to successfully build such a wide and vast network? Like network. What are some of those aspects?
Again, I was a manager, right? So I didn't want to be on stage. I wanted to make the band famous, and I'm like along for the ride, right? I never wanted to be about me. Even my social, I didn't even have Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn or these things really, but Gary made me get on them. He's like, someone has to be the face of Green Street a little bit, like that's what people want these days. Want to know who's behind these things, and he like literally made me do these things. He made even this stuff. I'd never do interviews. I never did them, but he's like making me do these things, because he just knows how important they are, so it's been a big challenge for me to because I don't want to be a known person. My hero is a guy named Lou Wasserman. Do you know who that is? Okay, perfect. Exactly. Google Lou Wasserman later. You'll be like, what the fuck? There's a documentary about him called The Last Mogul. And he really created the music and entertainment industry as we know it today. He started what we know as Universal, like movies and records and stuff, And but it was like, I think CBS radio back then he started it as and grew it. But The Last Mogul is fucking crazy. And no one's ever heard of this guy. No one knows who he is, but he was the most powerful person in Hollywood. So on a business side, that was really, my inspiration there of how to run a successful business without being the face of it really, or without being, putting your face on it, I guess. And then there's the Book of the Way, right? There's like the Tao Te Ching, or how you pronounce it. I'm not exactly sure, but, there's that book that is like, if you want something, you shouldn't want it, and all those kind of like, fucking, philosophy like thoughts, like, from Asia, basically. And in that book, when I read that book, they were saying like, the best leader is a leader that the people underneath him and the team and whatever the community will call it, they feel like they got there on their own. It's like not a king taking credit for it. In fact, it's the opposite. It's someone that like the people feel like they did it, So that's been my approach forever. It's like, I don't need the credit. I don't need to put my name on it and stuff. I'm doing it now a little bit because Gary asked me to. He thought it was important, But it's like I don't want to be stopped. I even at Hall of Flowers, like people ask to take photos with me now and stuff, and I'm not into that at all. You know what I mean? So So anyway.
And that's why I've thanked you probably 3 times now for hopping on the interview to, just bugging you like, hey, I'm about to put a mic in your face. And because again, you don't strike me as the individual. Some people thrive in that position. Some people crave it. And, I feel like myself, I cater to more doing it because it's
Yeah.
the benefit of it, lack of the personality.
My guy Zach Nadilli, I mentioned a few minutes ago. He's like a branding genius. Like, he smokes me. He's like, no pun intended. He's so much better than I am, and he really helped me because I do branding for all these companies for forever. But like, for me, it's hard to see the forest from the trees, so I can't really tell myself. It's bad for me to like work on me or work on the Green Street brand. So over COVID, we spent, and I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of hours together with him helping me try to figure out what to do with the Green Street brand and how to like play everything together and have it all work in unison. And the first thing that he did was show me 2 photos. And one was Richard Branson on like a jet ski and a jet pack with a silver fucking outfit on. And in that same grid, it was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Willy Wonka, whatever, with the crazy outfit. That was on one side. And the other side was Wizard of Oz. And he's like, pick one. And I was like, oh, obviously not Richard Branson with the jetpack, and not Willy Wonka. I want the fucking Oz, of course. And he's like, perfect. Now, if you do that, everything has to go in this direction versus this other. These are 2 definitely different starting points with me as a human and how it is reflecting the business, So that's how I feel about it. Like, I want, I don't know. I mean, I have a ridiculous ego, obviously, like in life of different things. And I'm a wise ass, and I like am short with people sometimes. And, I have like a lot of convictions, but I know it's not a single individual thing. This is about truly growing the community into an industry, and it's not going to be done with me. That's even why I want there to be tons of other people that do the businesses that I do. Like, I want there to be more events and more trade shows and more buildings. I want this, this has to grow. I'm just trying to kind of lead by example with some of the things that I think are going to naturally happen anyways.
I love that, and obviously, like we were saying a little bit earlier, like Green Street is as a company has evolved greatly as well. Like, what started as an agency is now turned into a building, turned into a festival, turned into a series of events, both B2B networking and B2C focus.
Yeah.
How much of that evolution is rooted in just kind of pursuing the passions, or is it like kind of again been back you had this vision of like, we're going to start with A, jump to B, start to C, or has it just been the game, the game evolving and you guys evolving alongside of it?
Yeah, I think it's half and half. It was never like there's a vine and we need to jump to it and fuck everything behind us ever. Like I thought we'd always be making logos and stuff, but most advertising agencies, what makes or breaks them is IP. Right? If you look at any agency in the world, they either get acquired because they own some shit, or they made a lot of money because they own some shit. Like chicken fries is my favorite example with Crispin Porter Bogowski. I think they get 2% of chicken fry sales. I think it made them hundreds of millions of dollars, like way more than it would have been to just like pitch the client on something, way more than just a fee or whatever, right? So the problem is, it also kills agencies. IP is the number 1 killer of ad agencies. You can't take your resources off the paying clients and build stuff for yourself. So with my old partners, it was, which is some mentors of mine, Darren Romanelli, and where we signed GPen, those partners didn't want me to do IP. In fact, I was bringing up the trade show to them, the Hall of Flowers idea, for years. And they kept saying no. And when Gary came in, the first thing he said is, what's the IP? And I was like, oh, well, I have a lot. So how much time do you have? And it was just like, because I'll sit and spend a couple hours building on a concept or a brand or days, back to you said, like, how do you kind of do this? How do you bring stuff to reality? I'll spend days pontificating on stuff, building crazy Google decks just for me, just taking all my notes. And you know what I mean? I started this notebook here is like a couple, it's days old and it's halfway done. I'm drawing and writing constantly into it. So I forgot what I was talking about. Sorry, lost my train of thought.
Just the evolution of moving from aspect of
okay. So like some stuff was like the trade show. I was talking about it for years. The building happened naturally. The building was what's interesting, right? Because the building, it was like I we were renting an office. We had some showrooms in it. Someone else was like, hey, can I get an office in here? And then everybody that came over after that you could smoke a joint at the meeting was like, shit, can we get an office? And then I thought, well, back in the day when I had Initech, I rented a big building and I subleased it out. So that's how we started it. It was like, again, it was the hunch from before that I reused, but that wasn't part of the plan, and then the festival definitely wasn't part of the plan. The Green Street Festival, someone said the other day that they were like, yeah, you saw the opportunity and you jumped on it. And I was like, it's fucking not an opportunity at all. It is an emergency. Like like these festivals need to happen or the cannabis is not going to become an industry. There needs to be dozens of events, not just for the brands, for the consumers. Imagine if there was one music festival a year only, or 2 music festivals only. Like, what music's not going to be big enough? Do you know what I mean? Right. You need to have cannabis events every day of the week, 7 days a week, 10-pole events throughout the year, or whatever. But you know what I mean? Or football, if there was just the Super Bowl and no other stuff happening, no way. You need to build it into the lifestyle, right? So, to me, that was the thing. It's like I look at it like 2 ways. There needs to be platforms. Those are one-time builds. South by Southwest, Coachella, Bonnaroo, Outside Lands. These are one-time builds. And then you can launch an infinity amount for us, Hall of Flowers or Green Street Festival or the building. Then you can launch an infinity amount of brands through those. As soon as you have the network, then you can launch, the consumer brands or whatever. Now then you can do advertising with the corporate brands. I'll get Taco Bell money from Gary eventually because they want to be part of the festival or the building or whatever it may be, So, but yeah, it's like clients suck. You don't have to comment. I hate them all. I don't work with any clients at all right now. We stopped completely doing client work. They hire us because we're experts and then they don't listen to what we tell them. Your life, yep. I'm sure, yep. And it's like, I was sitting with Gary right before COVID. It was the end of the year, and we were doing our recap of like what the company, how it did, right, with the money. And I was at Vayner Media in Culver City, here in LA at his agency, and we're whiteboarding out, and I'm giving him the numbers, and the agency was doing very well. We were making millions of dollars a year, but it cost us millions to make it. So we're kind of treading water. And if you want to build a big ad agency, that's what you do. And he could tell I was just defeated and tired. We'd hired all these people. Now I'm managing this whole team and we're signing all these clients and billing and oh my God, it's like collections and all the shit. And he's like, well, what do you want to do, Rama? Like, what's going on? You don't seem excited. And I'm like, I just want to build shit that we own and I don't want to listen to anybody. And he literally said, well, what if we didn't have clients? I was like, what? Like, that's all we do is have clients. We're an agency. He's like, well, in theory, we could shut it down. We could let everybody go. We could just start focusing on intellectual property and just build stuff that you want to build, And I was just like, holy fucking shit. And I literally like hugged him and left and was like, this is what we're going to do. We had some huge contracts that were all expiring in the new year. And I went to the staff, we only had like 10 people or something. I went to the staff and said, hey, listen, update, we're going to shut down, but you have a couple months to figure it out. We're going to just not renew any new clients, no new business. I'm not going to fuck anybody over. I'm not going to leave clients or my staff hanging. And Gary said, I'll hire anyone from the agency to my agency if they can't get a job, or we'll write letters of recommendation for their dream jobs. Let these people go and, and they have 2 months to figure it out, long time. And so he did that. And this is right before COVID, and we didn't know COVID was going to happen. So it was like we shut the storm windows not knowing, and then the fucking hurricane came, and it literally saved our company, our lives, everything we're doing. We had let go of everybody, and then a month later was like, everything's shut down, everything's done, everything's dead. So when that happened, it was like everything happens for a reason, I say, usually my mom says that when bad stuff happens, but we just kind of took it like as a really great sign. And then it's after that, I spent fucking 60 hours a week just working on IP ideas. I have so many ideas that we haven't even ever talked about that are like the next level of the stuff. You know what I mean? And most of the stuff exists in every industry. We're not inventing trade shows or inventing these co-working I'm in the fashion district and jewelry district. There's 50 buildings just like me for jewelry and fashion right around me. So my hope is that becomes the cannabis district, and we kind of grow that, and other companies come in and do that together or whatever. Hall of Flowers, trade shows have existed for hundreds of years, and the festival, it's music. I don't want to call it Woodstock because I don't want anyone to burn it down, but we're not reinventing the wheel on anything. We're just like properly giving the cannabis community and industry something it deserves. And I know because I'm coming from that world. I'm with them. I've been helping these brands and these operators and entrepreneurs. I've been helping these men and women carry their stuff through the mud for the last 20 years. We've been, or the last 10 years, right? We've been at all the stuff. We've been at all the events. We've done all the things, hundreds and hundreds, worked with every single brand in the space, under promise and over delivered, hopefully 95% of the time, but again, back to music. I'm only doing this because when I did music, I was like, shit, like you could own the Warped Tour or own the South by Southwest, or, there's opportunities to really be involved, and back to Lou Wasserman and Universal, when I saw that documentary and saw what he did, it was like, wow, like maybe Green Street could be the Universal of cannabis. That's why we're even putting our name on the building. We weren't going to call it Green Street in the beginning. We weren't going to call the festival Green Street. And now that's why I asked you about, your cannabis product launch recently, and you're concerned using your name on the two different ways if it's bad. I think it's great, because we're just building brands within cannabis. Today it might seem weird, but in 10 or 20 years from now, it won't be like weird, So that's like our approach,
No, I love that, and thank you for sharing. There's a lot of gems in there, and one of the things that stood out, or another one of the things that stood out when we spoke at Hall of Flowers the other day is towards the end, you were saying how yourself, myself, and a lot of us in the space are outsiders in cannabis, right? And how growers are the core of this. And I saw one or two comments, and someone actually emailed us about that and was like, "Yo, I really appreciate it." And that video just came out; it doesn't even have a ton of views, but it struck with I saw one comment, and then I saw one email. And someone was like, "Wow, awesome. I really loved how he said that." So I was just curious if you could kind of expand on that comment, and because I think that mindset has a lot to do with your success in this space, because it's based that mindset is correlated to your approach. So I'm curious if you can expand on that concept.
So absolutely, we're outsiders. I've never used this example, but it came to mind when you were asking, so I'll use it. But I want to talk about it a little more than just this one example, if that's okay. So I used to manage a band. This is after the record label. I sold my record label, started managing major label artists, signed a band to a major label, huge check. Oh my God, like we made it, we're rich kind of thing. And we're making the album, and I made a comment on one of the songs to one of the band members. And he said, shut up or whatever, or you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You can't play guitar. So therefore I couldn't comment on the song, right? Which is ridiculous, obviously, you know what I mean? But it really hurt me to the point where that was 20 years ago. And it like instantly just came back right here. I remember like in the room when it happened, so that's kind of something that I've seen, right? But then I grew up in skateboarding, and like there's posers and non-posers, and like the way you hold your board matters and all these things. I grew up in punk rock, and there's major label and indie label. Like we hated the Offspring and Nirvana personally because they were too mainstream. They weren't punk to me at the time. You know what I mean? And with this one, with the cannabis stuff, it was like I truly believe that the celebrity chefs in the space, the lead singers and guitar players, are the cultivators. They are the artists. It all starts and ends with them. So maybe that will change in 30 years or something. I hope not. I hope the people, like maybe the people that grew the hops back in the day for the beer were like the stars, and now we don't even know who grows the hops anymore or something. But I don't think so. I think it's celebrity chef. I think it's more that world. And because of that, if I'm just the manager and I'm just on stage and or the booking agent, or if I'm just doing the back end work, I'm not the artist, and they need to have the best bed, and they need to have like the right food and the right attention and the doctor and the whole thing, like that they, it's about them less than, I'm like running the business side of the business, So from the very beginning, I got that. And it's not just coming from me, right? If you meet anyone back then, especially that was in the industry, if you grew good weed, that was a big deal. You know what I mean? Because there wasn't like these other businesses to like be like, I made a bunch of money selling it or doing that. It was just like, whoa, like I was like, wow, and so that was just our belief from the very beginning that we're outsiders in the space, even though I've added a ton of value and I'm hopefully just getting started by adding value to it. And that's it. I'm like there. I'm not the talent, I guess, or where, maybe you are, but I didn't do that stuff. I can't grow anything. I have dead plants. I kill cactuses, So I think it was like that part, but for sure, absolutely, I know that it's important and people respect it. And I'm not surprised you got messaged, because more people need to realize that. You have respect, my region. I had a trademark for respect your flower. And that's like something that we haven't done anything with, but I have graphics for it and a fucking trademark for it and stuff. And it's, with this idea that it's like so important, there's the line from Pineapple Express where he's talking about like, how he's like, he says something about like, that would be like killing a unicorn with a bomb or whatever. Do you know what I'm talking about? And that's how we look at it. Like we look at it like, hopefully eventually like the grinder will matter, like how you take the plant. Even look at wine. I'll start over. Look at wine, right? Like my partner Josh says like today's equivalent of it is like people are just drinking wine out of their shoe. When there's a different wine glass for every single type of wine that exists. There's a different red and white, and there's all these, so we hope that it will get there, that it will, the fork will matter, and the industry will build around the product and around the cannabis versus just building what they want on their own, and then like trying to like make it call it widgets or they're just weed people, who cares, like whatever. It's my cousin grew tomatoes and I can do the same thing. The hope is that the cannabis is, again, I love weed. Like we love this, I'm a lifer, I'm a daily user. Like, I'm doing this for weed, not for like any money or the success of a business or something,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, back to what I was saying earlier about you being a visionary, I think in this space, when I meet people that have reached success and have accomplished things at a surface level, like you said, throwing a festival, that's not the groundbreaking idea, right? There's festivals going on, there's trade shows in every industry that follow a similar model. But behind it is that passion for breaking the stigma and providing value. And I think a lot of people that are doing something at the surface level that might not be the most mind-boggling brand new idea, but have a true why and a passion attached to it and a commitment to breaking the stigma. That's been a lot of the people that are breaking the mold. And I see a lot of people get into cannabis that want to carbon copy. Hey, I want to do that, but do it for weed. But when there's that lack of just emotional tie and desire behind it, that's where you see something turn to run of the mill versus something that ends up being kind of cutting edge of the industry. So really salute you for that. And that's something I've just noticed in interviewing people over these last few years. The people that you could talk to about, again, we're not just talking about trade show, we're talking about more than that. So I don't want to discredit you, but if we're just talking about the trade show, again, it's a trade show is not the most innovative idea. If we talk to someone about an after party, it might not be the most innovative idea, but if you talk to the founders and some of the visionaries behind that and let them go off on that and really unload their heart about it, you're like, wow, this person thinks about these things at such a more deeper interconnected level. And that's what makes something that maybe at surface level, I think, so much more impactful. So that's just something I've noticed, a consistency among yourself and others in the space. And
I truly care, like even with Hall of Flowers, right? Or any of the stuff that we're doing, it's like a lot of people would approach these events or this stuff and say, how much can we charge? You know what I mean? And we're the opposite. We were like, how much value can we provide? And then what is that worth? That's the real question here. But people come in they look at it like a money grab, quick thing. They look at it for the wrong reasons, in my opinion. And if people can make money, of course, but like if we can just provide value to the industry and you know, keep doing that and build something that, you know, will be sustainable for them, it could be forever. Hall of Flowers could exist for the next 100 years type of thing, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely, and I hope to attend as many as possible, man.
Mm.
You know, before I get you up out of here, man, is there anything else you want to plug? Anything that's coming up next for yourself and Green Street in 2022 and early 23?
Um, no, I'm not really like a plug type of guy. You know, I would say like if you like awesome stuff and cannabis, check out what we're doing, websites, Instagrams, whatever. You know, I'd say the only thing that comes to mind is like the cannabis industry is in a really weird spot right now, especially in California with the taxes and the sales and, you know, the different markets that are happening and whatever you want to kind of, however you want to sum it up, you know, everyone just Google it. You'll find a million different things that are wrong at the moment. But ultimately, brands are going to win, you know, and they're going to come out of California. New York's going to have an amazing run as well. You know, I'm excited to see what happens in these other states. Again, just like band wise, if you were in a band and you can only play in one city, what are we doing? You know, I want to go on tour, you know, and I'd say like I'll just say something like this. Like, I truly believe that interns today for cannabis companies will be CEOs of some of the biggest cannabis companies in 3 or 4 years from now.
Mm.
You know, so if you want to get in on it, it's definitely not even the first inning yet. This is just getting started. There's tons of space. The cream will rise to the top. You know, that's, you know, you just gotta, yeah, that's it. You know, and as far as like products or whatever, you know, like there's so much room for these things. There's so much space for these things, you know?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that's it, you know?
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate that. I will plug it, you know, for those on Instagram at Green Street, website greenstreetagency.com. I'll do the plug-in for Rama. Really appreciate you hopping on here, man. Truly man, appreciate just the wisdom that you've given behind the scenes and just all of our conversations, and then a lot of gems in this episode, man.
Thanks, bud. Yeah, I'd say, I guess greenstreetlosangeles.com all spelt out is probably like the coolest thing, right? That's the building, right? So the building is really like you know, a big undertaking, you know, 70,000 square feet, 8 stories, crazy restaurant on the ground floor, crazy rooftop, 2 event spaces inside, 40 something offices for brands, has some of the biggest brands in the world and some of the smallest, coolest brands in the world all currently in there. And, you know, it's like a cannabis business and event epicenter. So that's a good place to start kind of checking it out, because that's just not Green Street. That's all these other great brands and people and entrepreneurs in it too. So anything like in that world, if you're trying to kind of see what we're doing, that's like a good place to start.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you hopping on here. This is the North American Weed Tour podcast. We're actually running back-to-back episodes today. So we're going to be, if you're watching on LinkedIn or YouTube right now, we're going to be back in a couple minutes. Stay on the channel. We're talking to some folks out of the Missouri market. Rama, really appreciate you hopping on here. We'll be back with more content soon, guys.
Yeah. Thank you.